This year, if you were a gold level sponsor, you have the opportunity to speak at a meal. And this afternoon, we're very lucky to have Megan Moody with us, who works for Virtus Nutrition. And so the slides you've been seeing have featured some of their products, and you'll see some of the other sponsors weaved into some of the other meals here at the convention. But trying to give some recognition and make you all aware of who these sponsors are and what they do. So with that, I'd like to call up Megan, and she needs no real introduction as she is one of us and grew up right here in New York. And so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Jenny. Earlier this week, one of my friends asked me what I was doing this weekend. Not being from an agricultural background, when I told her a cow convention, she asked, well, will that be fun? And that got me to thinking about the reasons why I was excited to come to the 2012 All Breeds Convention. I thought back of all the memories of junior conventions with Quiz Bowl and DJM contests. And now, as grown-ups, we come not only for the camaraderie, but to work towards the future and the progress of our respective breeds. And also, as a company, I'm proud to work for a company, Virtus Nutrition, who has shown that they care about registered animals by sponsoring this convention. So with our Omega Nutrition solution, we work every day to increase profitability for us dairy farmers. By balancing our omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, we can greatly increase embryo retention by over 50%. We also, by balancing your omega-3s and 6s at the right stages of lactation, you can increase conception rates, help with the transitions, which we all know are a big time in our cows' lives, as well as help produce about 4 pounds more early milk. So with that, with my explaining to friends and folks that aren't involved in the dairy industry, and even being a part of the dairy industry every day, working for Virtus Nutrition, I'm also proud to be a part of my family's dairy farm once again, even though my parents might not forgive me for the purchase last night at the auction. Thank you all for coming, and it's a great honor to be a part of this convention.
Thank you, Megan. Now we'd like to move into talking a little bit, we talk about reflections, and part of the reflections is to reflect upon our history. And something this year with the breed reports, we're reflecting on our youth and how important our youth are to our organizations and the future of our industry. And with that, I'd like to call up our first breed report, which is going to be Caitlin Wally from the New York Ayrshire Club.
Okay, so good afternoon. My name is Caitlin Wally, and I am the New York State Ayrshire Princess. This is our short little presentation, just reflecting on the New York Ayrshire breed and our New York Ayrshire Club. I am a sophomore at Cornell University studying animal science, and I'm from Walton, New York, where I grew up on Golden Ear Farms, which is a registered Ayrshire farm. So today we're going to kind of reflect on the animals that we've had in our breed, from the past animals with the classic horns to our current cows, one of the most famous, Red Pepper. And this is kind of a slideshow just showing the different animals from New York State, really high quality animals. This first animal is Clearview Christmas. She was first at Expo, and she got the All-American status for her age class. And then going through the rest of them, like I said, it's just a great array, trying to show you all of the great cows that we have in New York State from all of the great breeders all across the state. We're really highly represented. These animals go to their local county fairs, they go to regional shows, they go to state fair, they go to carousel, and they also stand first place in a lot of classes at your national shows, coming from New York State. So they do get the New York Ayrshire Club name out there. That one's mine. This is an example of one of our Ayrshire clubs, the St. Lawrence Valley Ayrshire Club. They have an incredibly large amount of people that are active in that club. This is from Glengarry Farm in Burke, New York. These are some of our Northern New York Ayrshire members that are pretty active in the Ayrshire Club. This is our top-selling animal at the spring sale, Libby's Lilac, who was purchased by Nancy Vale. We'd also like to extend our congratulations to James Patso Sr. He was honored with the National Distinguished Service Award at our national convention this summer, which is great coming from our state to win that national award. These are just a couple of pictures from State Fair this year. And this is our previous CAF Scholarship Program winners. This is one of the programs that we have that helps encourage the youth, and this is the youth that went to the National Convention and did awesome. We had 2 youth book participants, Erin Curtis and Sarah Pulver. They had great books and they won awards with those. This is our senior Dairy Quiz Bowl team, which won the national competition. It was awesome. This was the first year we had it, and to go and just win it, it was great. We had 2 members who participated in Dairy Jeopardy. Tyler placed 1st and Christopher placed 6th. We also had 9 photo contest wins and an overall winner, and we also had folding displays. We had 3 members who received excellent cow awards. And we had a great time. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors, and we're going to go to Wisconsin, and we're going to do even better. So expect to see more pictures next year. The youth had a great presence at the State Fair this year. These are the Grand Champion and the Reserve Grand Champion of the Youth Show. The Junior Champion and the Reserve Junior Champion of the Youth Show. This is the Junior and Reserve Junior Champion at the Spring Youth Show. Our state picnic this summer was hosted by the Curtis family. We had really great weather and it was awesome. We had lots of fun. And we had lots of friends and family just came out, and it was a great day. This is the Princesses in Waiting. And this is me with Sarah Pulver, our 2010 Ayrshire Princess. Every year at the State Fair, there's the Little Britches Showmanship, and we sponsored it this year. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's incredible to see all of these youngsters, such a large group of these youngsters that come out. We do have the older members that help out, but just looking at that line, you can see how many kids do it, and it's crazy to see that there is that enthusiasm for showing. We had our t-shirt sales. This is the overall open show junior champion, owned by Tom Gillette. And these are the Grand, Reserve Grand, and Honorable Mention cows at the State Fair. We also have really good representation, like I said before, at national shows. These are some of our national show winners in the junior division. These are our open show winners at Harrisburg this year. And we also had some winners in Expo. These are our Ayrshire Club officers for this past year. And we would just like to thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for having us, and go Ayrshire.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next, we'd like to give some time to the New York Brown Swiss Association, and I'd like to call up Sarah Van Orden.
Thank you. I am going to just give a brief overview of some of the highlights of 2011 in the New York Brown Swiss Association events. It was hard to narrow it down. I kind of got the top 10 categories of events, but we had several herds recognized on the national level this year for their genetics, and also PTPR, which is a ranking of herds based on an index of type and production. So it's kind of an all-around herd award, but several herds that were in the top 10 in their herd size category on the national level. We had a small but very enthusiastic delegation at the National Convention this year in Maryland Tucker True won the junior speech contest and got to give his speech in front of the entire delegation at the convention. And Rebecca Slattery received an award for her poster display contest. We are looking forward to next year's convention in Burlington, Vermont, and having a large group of juniors go and represent us there. We have been growing our canton shows, which is the Swiss word for region or district. We have shows in all 5 cantons in the state. The Capital District Canton was the largest this year with almost 100 head just at the district show. We also instituted a youth show at the New York State Fair separate from the 4-H show, so that our junior Brown Swiss members that are not old enough or too old for 4-H are eligible to show and get junior recognition. And we also had live streaming of the Brown Swiss show at the New York State Fair this year for the first time, and we plan on continuing that at the Spring Carousel, and we'll be looking for sponsors to do that this year. Forest Lawn Anthem Busy was the grand champion at the New York State Fair. She's been a longtime favorite in New York. She's owned by Elite Dairy, and she went on to place 4th at the World Dairy Expo and received 3rd place honorable mention in the Total Performance Award. Snow Valley Legacy Sandy is another New York bred and owned cow that had quite a ride this year. She's owned by Jessie Hargrave from Hewelton, New York. She was grand champion of our New York State Fair Youth Show, then went to Harrisburg and was also named grand champion there. She was honorable mention grand champion of the Open Show and the Central National Junior Show. She also is our production and cheese yield winner at the state level this year and will be competing at the national contest. Hills Valley Perfecta Ritz, another cow that just really stood out this year for Hills Valley Farm. She was nominated All-American in 2009, 2010, and again this year. She was intermediate and reserve grand at Harrisburg, intermediate champion at Madison. And Hills Valley had just a string of winners at all of the national shows they attended this year, earning premier breeder and exhibitor at Harrisburg and Louisville. Dublin Hills Treats, she kind of grabbed the trifecta this year. Grand champion at Harrisburg, Madison, and the Royal for Elite Dairy. This fall was the 75th Eastern Breeders' Sale in Cobleskill, New York. It's one of the longest running consignment sales in the country. There were 72 lots that averaged 24.36 with 9 project calves averaging almost $1,000, which goes to support the demand for Brown Swiss, especially with our youth in the future. We had a very successful calf raffle this year. The calf was donated by Leanne Button, and the winner was Samantha Nickerson, who's a junior member from Western New York, and she was thrilled to get this calf. So it was a win-win situation, offering one of our breeders some publicity, a great fundraiser for our association, and a nice calf for a deserving junior member. And Colton Slattery was our top ticket salesperson. I know he probably hit up most of you sometime during the year, and he'll be out in full force again next year, as we already have a calf donated by Jason DeMay for this year. So all in all, New York had a great 2011. Our Brown Swiss were the first state herd at both Harrisburg and Madison. We have 22 cows on the top PPR list, which is the Brown Swiss Index, as of December 2011, and they're owned by 10 different breeders in New York, so I think that is pretty impressive that many herds have cows. I think the top one is the number 23 cow, which is Snow Valley Vigor Pooh Bear, and she's owned by Chelsea Hargrave. And we also have 25 2011 All-American nominations that just came out. So we are looking forward to seeing the winners in those contests in 2012 and everything else that New York breeders have to offer. At this point, I'd like to introduce Mary Miller, who is our outgoing New York Brown Swiss ambassador. and she is going to crown our 2012 ambassador.
I want to start off saying thank you to the Brown Swiss breeders. I had a wonderful year working with everyone. And I also want to have a personal thank you to Terry Martin and Dave Martin, because they actually got me involved in this breed. So I want to give a really big thanks to them. I think I'm going to cry probably, because I just love this breed. And now our new 2012 Brown Swiss ambassador is Chelsea Jones.
Hello everyone, my name is Chelsea Jones. You will hear from me in a few minutes because I am also a part of the Holstein Association, but I am very honored to be the new New York State Brown Swiss ambassador. I am actually recently just getting started in this breed, but I have always admired this breed from afar, and I finally convinced my dad, well, I kind of just told him that I was going to buy one, and so we now have my wonderful Brown Swiss calf, and I'm very excited to be a representative of your breed for this year, so I can't wait to work with all of you. Thank you.
Just like to call up Stacia True for a quick presentation.
This year, our Brown Swiss Association is enthusiastically embracing a new president, but sad to say farewell to a president who has done a wonderful job of leading our association for the last 9 years. She's handled the multiple personalities very well, and she's always represented our breed so well and made us so proud. And so on behalf of the Brown Swiss Association, Sarah, please accept this gift.
Now I'd like to turn it over to Mary Foote, to give a report on the New York Guernsey breeders.
Hello everyone, my name is Mary Foote. I'm currently serving as the Guernsey Youth Association President, and I'm so excited to be here today. The Guernseys have just had a wonderful past year this year, whether it was having a distinguished breeder inducted in the very shrine, or even our All-American nominations. We just had a terrific year, and New York definitely represented well on a national level. To start off, I kind of want to share the All-American nominations. Though we didn't have as many as past years, I definitely have to say the quality this year was just phenomenal. Our first nomination was the All-American Winter Calf. She's owned by Friendship Farm and Partners. Her name is Cooley Crest Nick Julian E.T. Our next one was actually kind of went undefeated this past year. She won at Madison, Harrisburg, and State Fair, and her name's Adams Creek Maury Olympia. She's nominated All-American Fall Calf, and she's also owned by Friendship Farm and Partners. Another one was the All-American Winter Yearling. Her name's Adam Creek Maury Avalanche. She's owned by Friendship and Partners. Then we had for a nominated Fall Yearling was the Friendly Manor Sunray Lynette. She's owned by Friendly Manor Farm in Cattaraugus, New York. Then this one's kind of personal to me because this was my cousin who actually owned and bred this heifer, but she went and she was reserve junior champion at Madison of the open show and was junior champion of the junior show, and her name's Lucky Valley Yogi Kiera, and she's owned by Kristen Gallagher of wow, I forgot where she was from, but she's from Oneida. The next one was Ripley Farms Erin Yolanda. She's nominated All-American Junior 2-year-old, and she's owned by Seth Ripley of Cortland, New York. Next was Weekends Dilly's Sunflower. She's nominated All-American Senior 2-year-old, and she was the reserve grand champion at the junior show at Harrisburg, and she's owned by Betsy McKenna of Albion, New York. New York had some great grand champions this year, and our grand champion was Milbourne Tiller Blair. Blair also went to be the grand champion at Harrisburg, and she was the winning age cow at spring show and state fair, so that was kind of cool to have her at our shows. And she's owned by Maury Miller. Reserve Grand Champion went to Craigmore Erin Bryce. She's owned by Craigmore Farm of North Bangor, New York, and she was Reserve Grand Champion at the New York State Fair this past year. This was really awesome for New York Guernsey. We actually had the top selling animal at the SUNY Cobleskill sale. It was a choice out of pistachio pie, and I know everyone's familiar with pie because everyone wants a piece of her. But it sold for just over $12,000, and that was a huge accomplishment for the sale. It was the biggest consignment from the sale, and it was the second highest consigning Guernsey to a sale in the United States in 2011. And there's a picture of pistachio. This past year, I don't know, many of you have probably heard of the Connie cow. She was a Ripley Farms animal. She is the highest, she had 73 daughters and sons, making her the highest Guernsey to have so many offspring. She was lost at 12 years of age this past November. So that was kind of close to home with many Guernsey breeders, but a definitely respectable cow. National Convention, New York did an amazing job. We had Roland and Patty Ripley were named the All-American Guernsey Association Master Breeders, which was a huge accomplishment for them. They've been so successful over the years, whether it was at All-American shows or just helping out youth. They are very, very respected. Next, Betsy McKenna won the Turley Scholarship for the National Guernsey Association. She's serving as the actual New York Guernsey Princess this past year, and she's studying abroad this semester, so she couldn't be here with us. But she was also the first place National Public Guernsey Speaking winner, too, which kind of gave her some glory, which was awesome. Her sister Jenny was they took home the cake, I guess, New York and the McKenna sisters. They did it very well, but she was the first place Guernsey speaking contestant in her age bracket also. New York Guernsey had an awesome year. We were very popular in making the headlines. The first slide, this was on the cover of the Guernsey Journal. This is my cousin Christy with her winning fall yearling with the judges at Madison, and that was the November issue. So that was really awesome to see my own cousin on the cover and to see it. So that was a pretty big deal. And the next was Lynn Farrell. He was this Guernsey Scholarship winner, and this was on the cover of the Horse Dairyman. And he's being helped after, I think he was going in for junior champion at his local county fair. So that was awesome to see him there and to see that one of those calves was actually a Guernsey Scholarship calf. And then, even though I think my grandfather sometimes keeps it quiet, but he is a very respectable Guernsey breeder. And sometimes he tries to hide it, but he still loves the breed. He is always at shows, and he was inducted into the Dairy Shrine this past year. So even though he might be all Holsteins now, he still loves the Guernsey cows, so we have to include him there. This picture is actually the 2 millionth Guernsey, I think, that was registered from Welcome Stock, and he's the one holding the calf, and so that was a pretty big deal. And so I'd just like to congratulate him again for that, because that's a big accomplishment for the Holstein and Guernsey associations. So, and I'd just like to remind everyone, take another look at the Guernseys, because they're constantly changing, they're always improving, and the quality is just getting better. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that update. This past weekend, we had 2 young people that earned the title of the Distinguished Junior Member, which is the highest youth honor with our Junior Holstein Association here in New York. And we're very lucky that both of them decided to return to sunny Syracuse this weekend to talk to all of us. So I'd like to introduce Sean Galley and Chelsea Jones as your DJMs.
Hello, I'm Sean Galley, the new 2012 New York State Junior Holstein Association DGM. Has a tongue full. We're going to report on our junior convention that we had last weekend. Just a brief overview. To introduce myself, I'm a junior at SUNY Cobleskill, studying agriculture equipment technology, pursuing my bachelor's degree. I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of the Junior Association along with Chelsea. This past weekend, the Junior Holstein Convention was home for 325 junior members here at the Sheridan. As you can guess, trying to keep 325 kids all in line busy and not getting into trouble is quite a task, but we're able to do it with various activities. The first thing the members are greeted with is speech contest and Dairy Jeopardy. The speech contest had nearly 100 participants, three divisions, senior, junior, and intermediate, and two categories, I guess you would call them, prepared speech and extemporaneous. We had great speeches all around. The winners of each division presented their speech at the next day. Great speeches, learned a lot about the industry through them. Dairy Jeopardy is still a new contest that's developing popularity amongst juniors, and it's really growing from just a few we had about five years ago, and now we're up to 70 kids participating. In the middle of the day, the kids' day is just ruined because they have to take the dreaded written Dairy Bowl test, which I conveniently provided for them. Being Dairy Bowl chair, there's approximately 175 junior members that took the two tests, juniors and senior division, which included 24 junior teams and 16 senior teams. And then we presumed immediately after the test with annual meeting part 1 for the junior association, where we took nominations and did various reports on committees. Let's see where I am. Can't see. Yeah, all right. And then Sunday is devoted pretty much to the Dairy Bowl contest. Each double elimination kind of thing, with the two top teams going into the final rounds later on that day. The teams that are representing New York in Springfield, Missouri, are Oneida County for the juniors and Tri-County for the seniors. Excited to see those kids go. On Sunday, junior awards and speech awards are given out. The speech winners, there's other things which I can't remember for some reason. And then after that, you still got to keep these kids entertained that night. You got to do something to burn off the energy. So there's an activity, there's tug of war and a bouncy house and a bunch of other things, ice cream, so give them more energy. So that was a great time then. Hand it over to Chelsea to finish it up.
As he said, my name is Chelsea Jones, and I also attend SUNY Cobleskill, where I'm a freshman, and I study agribusiness with a concentration in dairy and with dairy production and management, and I'm going to fulfill you in with the rest of the fun weekend. Novice Dairy Bowl was held after the Productions Award Luncheon, which is on Sunday, where the juniors are awarded for their production and breeding accomplishment, which they are honored for the highest 3 in milk in their pounds, highest 3 butter fat, and highest 3 in protein. And breeders were awarded their Star Breeder, Breeder of an Excellent Cow, and Breeder of Multiple Excellent Cows awards. Again, there has to be a way to entertain over 300 young people, hence the reason for the dance on Sunday night, to blow off some steam from the Dairy Bowl contest, to meet new friends, and to reunite with old ones. Then it is off to bed for the next big day at convention. On Monday morning, the DJM breakfast seemed to be very high with anticipation for the awards. Somehow, we made it through the breakfast talking with the other finalists about the home farm, school, sports, and anything else we might want to come up with to try to calm our nerves. Finalists are selected based upon the book submitted by each individual on their various junior activities, community service, and knowledge and involvement in their own herds. The contestants in the 15 to 16-year-old division are also competing to go to the National Convention in Springfield, Missouri for the Young Distinguished Junior Member Contest. And the winners this year were Michaela Hanselman, Casey Holbert, Cody Sears, and Clyde Salmons. And the moment we were all waiting for, the selection of the new New York State DJM finalists. One by one, the finalists stood in front of everybody while short biography was read to familiarize them with the audience. While Nikki Holdridge While Nikki and Rachel gave their farewell speeches as outgoing DJMs, Nathan Holdridge made his way through the audience holding a dinner plate that had the answer we were all waiting for. Reading a card that accused these two young ladies of talking too much, it was requested to name the new DJMs. With a cute little rhyme, our names were chimed as the finale, Chelsea Jones and Sean Galley. The annual meeting part 2 succeeded the breakfast when the new chair people were selected to serve on the executive committee. Overall, it was a weekend full of fun, and it really got to show all of the talent and hard work that our juniors have put in through the past year. That's all we have for today.
And our last breed report, I'd like to call Cassie Chittenden up to talk about the New York Jersey Cattle Club.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cassie Chittenden, and I am the 2011 New York State Jersey Queen and the first alternate national queen. We chose to highlight our juniors' achievements in Louisville because this year we had a junior compete in every contest that was available at Louisville, and we placed and did well in every contest. So, first we had our national production contest. The 2-year-old division consisted of a New York sweep. In first place, we had Nathan Lawton, who had the high ME of 29,263 pounds of milk, 1,445 pounds of fat, and 974 pounds of protein. We then followed Ryan, followed his brother in second, myself in third, Catherine DeWitt in fourth, Maxwell Chittenden in fifth, Emily Chittenden in sixth, and Megan Chittenden in eighth. The National Pot of Gold contest also had representatives from New York. The Pot of Gold is where you select a calf in a sale, you take her home, get her bred, and she produces a record which is then submitted to a contest. And a certain portion of the money goes into a pot. So depending on where you place, you get money back on your purchase to make another investment in a cow. So in second place, we had Dory Baker. In sixth place, Nathan and Ryan Lawton. And in 15th was Ethan Dubois. You already have heard about myself in the Queen contest. We have a National Jersey Youth Achievement Contest, which is somewhat similar to the DJM process, but a little less complicated, where I placed third. We also had 4 exhibitors in the All-American Junior Jersey Show. We had Kylie Lear, who exhibited her 4-year-old cow and had the Yield Deviation Protein Award for her class, and Maxwell Chittenden, who had 6th with his senior 3-year-old. Ethan was 5th in the junior show, but also placed 6th in the open show at the All-American with his milking senior yearling. And my big cow there won the Sumbo Trophy for the top producing cow of the junior show with an Emmy of 32,000. A little more than that, but same difference, as a junior 2-year-old. So we would like to extend a sincere thank you to the State Club for your support. These are lifetime memories that you're making for us, and we value them. And all the New York juniors bond together when we go on this trip. As you saw in the beginning, we all spend time at the poolside. But also a sincere thank you to the Luxinger family, because they were the ones who took care of our animals when they were tied in Louisville. So we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you to all the breeds, and I do appreciate that everybody stayed on time this year to get through our very hectic program this afternoon. When our county club first talked about doing the convention, we said that it kind of came at a natural time. We've been very blessed to learn more about our Holstein history, and certainly, hopefully everybody's driven past the Rock in Peterborough. I remember being a little girl and driving past that, and my grandfather would always tell me the history of the Rock in Peterborough, and that's all I kind of knew about it. I knew there was a nice New York Holstein sign. I know it got stolen. I know where, you know, it somehow ended up in my grandparents' garage, and so yada yada yada. And so I'm sure there's history there, but my grandfather's not with us anymore to let me know what that story is. But anyway, it's pretty neat, and it's and a couple years ago I got to meet a wonderful gentleman named Milt Cernat, who kind of connected the dots for us. I mean, we were all little girls in Dairy Bowl, had to read Progress of the Breed, but we didn't really get it, you know, and certainly we have a lot to be proud of here in New York because we truly are the cradle of the breed. You know, the dairy shrine, if you will, resides here in central New York. And so with that, I know Milt is getting his presentation up and going. If you cannot see the screen in the back, you're more than welcome to move your chairs up this way. Milt wants to make sure everybody can hear and see what he has to say. But I'd like to introduce Milt Cernat. And Milt actually grew up in Iowa farm country, and he taught history at Syracuse University for 30 years, retiring in 2005. He had an appointment in the Department of African American Studies and History, and he taught history. And so you can start to see the link to Peterborough, New York, as it was one of the major stops on the Underground Railroad. And I'll let Milt tell the rest of the story because my history lessons I don't remember so well. He was a Dubois Fellow at Harvard University for a year as a research fellow there, and he looked at abolition. And he also was a Fulbright scholar, and he studied in Berlin and at the Kennedy Institute, did a lot of family research there. And so his natural interest when he retired, and we talked about, you know, you kind of do when you retire what you really want to do in life, except you don't make a lot of money at it. And so he traveled back to Peterborough to learn more about Gerrit Smith, who was a huge abolitionist. And basically, he was driving down Oxbow Road and saw the Rock and wondered what was behind that rock. And so we've been so blessed in our county and our state that Milt's gone and really done some research on the history of the Rock. And at this point, he's collected ag history for 40 years and is a true farm boy at heart. Said if he had to do it over again, he'd come to Cornell University in New York. Instead, he studied out in Iowa. So we'll hopefully, he'll have his presentation up and going. I'm sure he'll keep it pretty interactive. He has written several books. We actually have the Cradle of the Breed book out at the registration desk. That is for sale for $20, and it does go through a lot of the history. And he's also written a book on cheese, about the history of the cheesemakers here in New York State. It's called Say Cheese, the story of the era when New York State cheese was king. I'm probably ticking off some people in Wisconsin. And the Horse and Tractor Wars, Letters and Lessons from an Old Horseman. And this is the latest book he has put out. So with that, I think we'll get his presentation up and going, and please welcome Milt Cernat.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I'm pleased to be here. I used to work up the hill, but after 30 years, I decided I would go back to something I've loved all my life, which is agriculture. So we want to talk about the cradle of the breed. Well, this is your rock. I didn't know the rock was stolen. And
The sign.
The sign. I was going to say the rock, yeah. Here is the rock. Here's your Plymouth Rock, particularly if you are a Holstein breeder. So I'll tell you the story now about the rock and the man behind it. This is Peterborough. Some years ago, folks from the National Abolitionist Hall of Fame, which is in Peterborough, we were out at the state fairgrounds and trying to promote Peterborough, and folks would come by, and the question they always asked was, where's Peterborough? Well, Peterborough is in the heart of Madison County. It's a rather sleepy village now. Sad to say, they just lost their post office. But in the 19th century, it was Grand Central Station for social reform, and as you will see, for the Holstein breed. Gerrit Smith and Gerrit Smith Miller are the two folks we want to talk about today. Now, just up Oxbow Road from Peterborough is the site of the Gerrit Smith Miller farm, and where the boulder today is. And there is the boulder, the granite boulder, which was put up in 1928 by the New York Holstein Association. If you look at your program, you will see the words of the inscription. On this farm was born Agu, #1 in the Holstein herd book, the first cow registered in the first published herd book of the breed. On this farm, March 10th, 1871, Dowager, #7, Holstein herd book, completed a record of 12,681 pounds, 8 ounces milk in a year. That's about 3 times what Holstein cattle were giving at that time. The first yearly milk production record ever recorded on a Holstein Friesian cow in America. In commemoration of these events so fundamental in their contribution to the establishment and development of this great breed of Holland cattle and of the dairy industry in America with the inestimable benefits to humanity, this tablet is erected. Now this is what you will see today when you go there. The silo, part of the silo anyway, is original, but the barns and so on are gone. The herdsman house still stands, and if you dig around enough, you might find bones. I don't know about the DNA of them, but you might find bones that would be from the herd that Garrett Smith Miller kept. So here we go, the cradle of the breed. Garrett Smith Miller, grandson of the famous abolitionist, was born in 1845, died in 1937, lived to be 92 years old. And he established the Kriemheld herd. The name Kriemheld comes from a Norse-German epic that Wagner worked into his Ring epic, and apparently it was picked up by Garrett Smith Miller's brother Dudley when he was over studying in Prussia. Now in 1929, August 17th, the New York State Holstein Association came to Peterborough to honor Garrett Smith. Some 5,000 people came. They conducted the afternoon's activities, broadcast them over the radio. Here are the cars jammed on to the square there in Peterborough. And here's a tug of war. They had a tug of war between the north part of Madison County and the south part of Madison County. They also had other events like a fat man's race. They had a nail driving contest that was for women. They had a 3-legged gunny sack race. They had the kinds of things that the youth were doing here not too recently. You can see the Civil War statue in Peterborough. And here is Garrett Smith, the man of the hour, along with Governor Loudon, ex-Governor Loudon of Illinois, who had been president of the National Holstein Association. And you can see the barns that stood there at one time. And there was a sign in the barn where you could see the place where Agu, the first cow registered in the Holstein herd book, had been dropped. So they're walking now to the dedication. And here's the platform of notables of the day, including individuals such as Professor Wing, who was the professor of dairy science at Cornell, wrote a famous book called The Book of Butter, and Jared Van Wagenen, whom I currently was telling Horace Backus to become very interested in. If you go to the State Fairgrounds and go to the Daniel Parrish Whitter Agricultural Museum, you will be visiting a place that Jared was very instrumental in getting going. He was also behind the Farmers Museum at Cooperstown. He was a Guernsey man from Lawyersville, settled on that farm, which had been in the family since 1800 after graduating from Cornell in 1891. He was a farmer philosopher who was very active in keeping farm affairs before the public. And here are Holstein representatives. The man in the white hat in the front row is related to a good friend of mine He was formerly president of the New York State Holstein Association. He was, let me quick see if I can come up with a name. A. Hartshorn. That name may ring a bell with some of you because the Hartshorns had a farm just south of Hamilton, I think it was. But here's Garrett Smith, the abolitionist. This is the grandfather now of Garrett Smith Miller, Jr., the Holstein man. Garrett Smith was one of the wealthiest individuals in the land at that time. Here's his wife, Anne, and they lived in the mansion. This place was a center of a beehive of social reform. Harriet Tubman, John Brown, many of the abolitionists and social reformers, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, all came here. The house burned down, as we'll see, in 1936. But Garrett Smith Miller, after he married, the grandson, moved into this house. What does still exist on the property is the land office building, and Garrett Smith Miller transacted much of his land business. He owned land way up into the Adirondacks through here. This is the mother of Garrett Smith Miller, Elizabeth Smith Miller. She was the one who helped to make the bloomer costume. If you go to Peterborough, you'll see a sign indicating that she helped to make the bloomer costume, which was part of the women's rights movement at that time, more popular. And this is Charles Dudley Miller, Colonel Miller, who was Garrett Smith Miller's father. He was a horseman and, well, let's put it politely, a bit of a dandy, as you might suspect from his outfit here. He seems to have moved to Peterborough and helped Garrett Smith Miller, his son-in-law, carry on some of the farm activities. Garrett Smith Miller was always known as Gat. And here he is at age 18. He went to study in the Boston area, a Latin school, and then eventually went to Harvard, though he never actually graduated from Harvard. And here he is. He's the gentleman to the left of the monument here with some of his old colleagues. At Harvard, he and some of his classmates organized the first American version of football, which we know now as soccer. So he is in the National Soccer Hall of Fame, as well as in the National Dairy Hall of Fame out in Fort Atkinson in Wisconsin. And here's the very ball that they used at Harvard when he helped organize that game. He also is said to have introduced baseball to Peterborough. And here's his wife, Susan, Mrs. Garrett Smith Miller. And some of they had 3 children. This is Garrett Smith Miller, Jr., who went on to be at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. He was a very well-known archaeologist. And Basil, with his Basil son, and then little Willie. Little Willie died early. And this is the cottage across the brook, which still stands in Peterborough. Norm, Dan, and Dot Wilsey lived there, and this is where Garrett Smith Miller and his young bride, after he had returned from Harvard, first moved. But this is the farm that stood there along Oxbow Road. There you can see the barns and the still existing house that the herdsman lived in. The brother of Garrett Smith Miller was Dudley Miller, Charles Dudley Miller. And Charles Dudley Miller goes off to Pomerania, which is now part of Germany or Prussia, and he studies at the University of Jena, and it seems there is where he first saw what later we know as the Holstein breed. But it wasn't called that. They were simply black and white cattle, Dutch cattle. Here's Dudley Miller again. So there's sometimes a great deal of controversy as to where the Holstein breed originated. Well, if we're talking about the cattle that Charles and Dudley Miller and Garrett Smith Miller imported in 1869, then we have to say North Holland. North Holland or West Friesland. There were two Frieslands at one time, and West Friesland and North Holland overlaps. So in 1869, Garrett Smith Miller goes off to Holland, and he and his brother bring back these 4 cattle. But where had Garrett Smith Miller first seen the black and white cattle? Well, they had first seen them, at least in Gat's part, when Gat was studying at Harvard, and he would take rambles in the countryside, and he saw a farm near Boston that William Chenery, I guess that's how you pronounce it, operated, where he had some cattle. And this gentleman had gotten his first black and white cow from a sailing vessel, Dutch sailing vessel, about 1852, that had been on the vessel to provide milk for the sailors. And that, though, may not be the very first importation. I suppose there's some folks here would argue that the very first were the Dutch cattle brought to Cazenovia. You may know that John Lincoln and those who were engaged in planning Cazenovia brought some cattle, but those were eventually, those cattle, their genetics, you might say, were washed out and into breeding. So we have to go back now to 1869, when 4 were brought over. Well, Garrett Smith would make a total of, bring over a total of 53 cattle in 5 different groups over a period from 1869 to about 1875. Let me see for sure. No, 1869 was the first group that came over. 2 groups came in 1879 for a total of 53. Now that was less than 1%, maybe 2% of all of these Dutch cattle imported, of the some 8,000 that were imported before 1905 when there was an embargo. Yet many of the great Holstein families over the years came from these cattle. The first 4 were Hollander, Crown Princess, Dowager, and Dowager was the dam of Agu, the first cow in the Holstein herd book today, and also Fraulein. But Garrett Smith Miller was very impressed with the way in which the Dutch farmers cared for their cattle. You saw the earlier slide where they tied their tails up and kept the barns clean. The barns actually were attached to the houses. And then the markets, the kind of markets where Garrett Smith Miller might have purchased some of these cattle. Garrett Smith Miller eventually sold off Hollander, Crown Princess, Dowager, and Fraulein, and then started to build his herd from his foundation stock: Billy Bullen, Ondine, Joanna, and what's the other one there? Empress, right. Now, Horace Backus told me, I think I've got this right, Horace, that at one point you got a phone call from a gentleman who said he had the skull of Billy Bullen and wished to sell it to you. I don't know if I remember that right, but I thought, well, that would be an excellent find if you could find that. One of Garrett Smith Miller's famous animals was Sir Henry of Maplewood. Here he is at the big exposition in New York City. He earned the title of the greatest prize-winning sire of the breed from 1885 to 1893. Now, Garrett Smith Miller was not one to push for records. He always preferred to breed for type rather than just to make records. And so he didn't believe in pushing his cattle, and he took very precise records. That's why he's also recognized as the first one to keep records, in addition to making, bringing over the cattle. Empress, and then Empire. Empire was his most famous bull. He even had a painting put in his living room of the mansion house there. How many of you can say that of your animals? Maybe you do. Empire was, let's see, Billy Bullen was the sire, and the dam was Empress, as I remember. Yes. And Billy Bullen's skull, that's apparently, not the skull so much, but a cast made of the skull, because a year or so ago, a woman came to Peterborough and said she had it, and we're hoping to somehow get that into the Peterborough collection. Well, here's Garrett Smith Miller inspecting his animals. And here are Frank Hoyt and Thomas Hoyt. The Hoyts worked for the Garrett Smith Miller's family for over 50 years. There's Frank Hoyt with one of the cows. I think Amy and Maurice Kelsey told me that their grandfather took cows up to the Garrett Smith Miller home farm, Highland Farm it was called. When the first 4 cattle came over, they came by ship from Hamburg to New York City to a port there, then I would imagine up the Erie, up the Hudson River, and then probably by train, but they walked them from Canastota up the road, up the hill to Peterborough, which must have been quite a hike. This is Hanson Williams, who also worked on the farm, and his story is fascinating because he was an escaped slave. He passed for white, though, and he actually served in a white regiment in the Civil War. But he was very well respected in the Peterborough community, and if you look at the Holstein herd book registries today, you'll see that some cattle are even registered in his name. So he went on using some of Garrett Smith Miller's animals to start his own farm. Again, the barns, I always thought it would be wonderful if these barns still existed, because there you would have a true historic site that you could visit and get some sense of the way in which the surroundings looked when Garrett Smith Miller was active. Now this is William Chenery, who was a breeder there, importer in the Boston area. And it was he who argued for using the name Holstein. Actually, that name seems to have come about by some historical accident. He wrote an article for the Department of Agriculture, and someone in Washington, D.C. changed the name using the name Holstein, which is a misnomer because they didn't come from the area known as Holstein, which was a Danish province, which has changed from Germany to Denmark over the years, but actually from North Holland or West Friesland. So, but Chenery's association advocated the use of the name Holstein, whereas others wanted to call them Dutch cattle, as did both Garrett Smith Miller and his brother. Solomon Hoxie was a gentleman in the Unadilla Valley, where there was also a concentration of these black and white animals, and he was an advocate of the Frisian name. So for about 11 years, until 1885, you had this battle between these two rival associations, and was finally settled upon as Holstein-Frisian Association in 1885. And I don't think Frisian was dropped until the 1990s sometime, something like that. So this is the symbol that marks the unification of the two organizations. And one of the Holstein herd books that Garrett Smith Miller edited. He edited the introductory material in, I think it was 5 of the first 7 books. One of the earliest attempts to document Garrett Smith Miller and his Holstein herd was by Frank Decker. Horace says that he remembers Frank Decker as coming down to the Earlville sales barn. Frank Decker was a Syracuse lawyer who had a farm, the Thindara Farm, 3 Rivers Farm, sort of west of where the Great Northern Mall is now. And he built his herd entirely from Garrett Smith Miller's animals and prided himself on those, and was the first to try to document some of this early history. Unfortunately, his self-published book is very, very hard to find these days, so it's practically impossible to reconstruct that. But he called it the Creamhill herd, and this is his little history. One of the things that Garrett Smith Miller also should be noted for was his involvement with the efforts to try to standardize the notion of what a Holstein bull or cow should look like. He was one of the men behind the first attempt to come up with the point scale system, and later on with the true type models. When I was up to visit Horace in Mexico, New York, he had one of these true types. He also has one very large one. I don't know if some of you have seen those. It's much larger than this. I think it's, I don't know what scale you would call it. Do you know, Horace? But these were used so that when animals were being judged or students were being taught about them, there'd be some notion as some consistency across the borders. Well, Garrett Smith Miller was not only involved in milk production, but also in butter and cheese production. Madison and Shenango counties were very intensive dairy states, dairy counties. Madison County, unfortunately, had no railroad passing through it. And so before there was refrigeration and so on, again, there wasn't much, a very convenient way to keep your milk. And so you churned them into butter or later cheese. And in the old dash churning method, usually done by women, it was a very tedious business. Eventually, Garrett Smith Miller would witness the introduction of new technologies such as the separator by the Swedish inventor de Laval. And this came in about 1884. Cheese, which was another of the contributions of Central New York to dairy history, go up just north of Rome along Route 46 across from the Rome Fish Hatchery, and you'll find another monument, another granite boulder, marking the farm where Jesse Williams, pictured here, had the first cheese factory, opened up in 1851. The second cheese factory was probably right there in Peterborough. This is probably what it was. Maybe later on it became a creamery. But Jesse Williams was the one who introduced the concept of associated dairying, pooling the milk from different farms and increasing the standards for the production of cheese. And then the Babcock test. The Babcock test, well, as one old-time milk buyer said, he had lectured farmers, he had quoted the Bible at them, he had tried every possible method to try to convince them that they should bring him good milk, and he said nothing persuaded them until the Babcock test came along. Well, Stephen Moulton Babcock is also a Madison County product. We associated him with the University of Wisconsin, but he grew up in Madison County, as did William D. Hord. Hord's dairyman, of course, is famous, and we think of him as the one who is the great man of Wisconsin dairy. But again, he grew up in Madison County near Stockbridge, and migrates as did many of the founders of the dairy industry. Before Wisconsin stole our cheese, they migrated out there. And, you know, in some ways, New York is the mother state of the dairy industry of Wisconsin. I mean, those are fighting words out there with cheeseheads, but, you know, it's worth a fight. So if you go to Fort Atkinson and visit the National Dairy Shrine there, you'll see things like this. Gail Borden, too, was from Central New York. Gail Borden became wealthy because during the Civil War, he came up with the idea of condensed milk. And this became something that the Army could use because you couldn't keep milk in the hot southern climates. And so he had these huge contracts with the Army. And Borden's milk condensers spread all over. Some of you can probably remember when Borden's factories were around the state. This is the one down at Norwich. Quite elaborate buildings. I'm not sure if the buildings are still there or not. We have many other things we could mention that Garrett Smith witnessed during his lifetime, Garrett Smith Miller. The Hinman milker. This should be on your Dairy Bowl quiz. Where was the Hinman milker invented? Today, if you wanted to go to find the original Hinman milker, Oneida. Anybody ever familiar with the Hinman milker? It was, I've got a friend who collects them over that way. Well, here's Garrett Smith Miller in the mansion yet, before it burns down. And this is something the GLF, in one of their advertisements, was pointing out that the cream-held herd, which was owned by Garrett Smith Miller of Peterborough, New York, made use of the GLF special formula of feeds. GLF, of course, was the predecessor of Agway. And here's one of Garrett Smith Miller's own promotional items talking about the contributions that his herd has made. And here he is with his wife Susan in their senior citizen years. And then in 1936, while Garrett Smith, his wife has now passed away, she passed away in 1927, they're in the mansion, and about 7 a.m. the alarm is given, there's a fire, the house burns to the ground. The fire company arrived, tried to get water from Oneida Creek, which flowed right behind the property, but discovered their hoses were too short. The chemical fire retardant was too cold, that wouldn't work, so it burns to the ground. Very few possessions could be saved. And Garrett Smith Miller moves in, this is what the mansion looked like before it burned, moves into the Beekman house, which still stands. It faces Oxbow Road as you drive north to see the boulder. And here he lives another year and dies in 1937, probably of pneumonia, but some people say that after the burning of the house, he just didn't have the same will to live that he'd had these many years, but he lived to be 92, and this is the Peterborough Cemetery, and there's his wife's grave, and there's his grave. And then in 1937, a few months later, they had the dispersal, and the dispersal was conducted by the Backus firm. They were located down at Earlville, and Horace was just telling me earlier this morning that his father, R. Austin Backus, located down there, because Madison and Shenango counties had these intensive dairy farming, and there were 3 railroads that came through Earlville. So the sale barns were there, and some of you may have been to the sale barns, but the actual sale, dispersal sale for the Creamhill herd was conducted by R.A. Backus and others up at the site of the Highland Farm behind that boulder. Now here are some folks that I'm sure Horace would recollect, but his father is to the left here, R.A. Austin, and I believe his brothers Charles and who's the other? Olin are here. Harold Lee is in this image. Some of you may remember that name. Miles Mitchell, for some of you old timers, that may ring a bell, is here too. We don't know what Horace was doing that day, but probably reading a book. He has a fantastic, I'll tell you this quick story. You know, I'm a historian. I grew up in Iowa. We had milking shorthorns in our area, but I didn't know that much about Holsteins, but that rock made me curious. So I'd go to the state fair, and if I ever saw a Holstein, I'd hang around and I'd ask folks, well, what do you know about Holstein history? Go to the Empire Farm Days, do the same thing. And inevitably, they would say, well, they look a little puzzled at first, and then they'd say, well, you have to see Horace Backus. So this happened, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And, you know, about the 7th time I said, well, I'll have to go see Horace Bacchus. So I called him up, you know, in Mexico there, and he was very kind, and, you know, come on up for a visit. And I sort of felt like I was going to see the Pope. You know, I mean, I was making this pilgrimage to the Vatican. And then when you see his library, it's better than the Vatican, at least if you're interested in Holsteins or anything. It's a wonderful place. So I made a couple visits up there and discovered his love for Civil War history, for books and so on. It's been wonderful. But I don't know where he was this particular afternoon. But we know where he was that day. He was still reading pedigrees. There's diorama. I think this was a sail east here over north of Kobelsko. Is that what it was? Yeah. So still going strong, still reading pedigrees, a wealth of knowledge and a fine gentleman. And not Catholic, but Presbyterian, I'll have you know. The National Dairy Hauler Shrine then has Garrett Smith Miller in it, along with many other dairy greats, and you should be proud of that. And here I am at the Iowa Century Farm, or Iowa Farms, just north of Des Moines, at the 1900 farm. And now I had this disclaimer that I'm a historian and not a Holstein guy, but I married into a Holstein family. We discovered this after I had written the book. This is my wife's grandfather, and in 1914, he sold out. We're not quite sure why. L.H. Lewis Rosenwinkel did this, but he had some Holstein cattle and some Holstein bulls, so sort of by marriage, I claim. But this would have been me if I had been a... I don't know what, you know, I'd be dreaming of something, milking away. That would have, I'm sure that would have been me. Well, you know that story. So I tried to get my wife convinced that I needed some Holstein cattle. So we saw these driving around one day, and I said, that's what I need. And I told her, I said, Jan, now if there's like maybe $150, $200, I'll buy me one, take it home. They'd be easy to care for, right? Now the production records aren't that good, but they'd be easy to care for. Well, I called back. This was at the Bull something antique shop south of Cooperstown. Some of you may know it. $900 for one of these things. So this is the book, Cradle of the Breed. There are some copies out on the registration table. I also have some with me. We're happy to sign them for you. That came as a result of my curiosity about that rock. And this is the one about Say Cheese, about the New York State cheese industry. And this is the one about the horse and tractor wars, the transition from horse farming to tractor farming from about 1910 to about 1940. We have copies of those. So I want you to come to Peterborough, another book that I wrote about the abolitionist story of Peterborough, to visit the rock, which is your Plymouth Rock.